She had been asking him for one evening. Just one. Not a grand vacation, not a weekend away. Just an evening where he looked at her the way he used to, or at least pretended to. That was how low her expectations had fallen. "You're coming tonight, right?" she had asked that morning, standing in the kitchen doorway in her robe, holding her coffee with both hands. "The Whitmore Gala. It's for the foundation. I helped organize the whole thing, Miles." He didn't look up from his phone. "I told you. I have a prior engagement. You told me 3 days ago you were free. Things changed." She stood there a moment longer than she should have. Then she nodded, set her mug in the sink, and walked back upstairs. Things had been changing for 2 years. Her name was Renata Cole, 37 years old. She had spent the last 4 years pouring herself into a marriage that had quietly, steadily stopped being a marriage at all. On the outside, she and Miles Hargrove were the kind of couple people pointed to, the elegant attorney and the woman who ran the Emmeline Foundation, a non-profit that provided legal aid and housing support to families in crisis. They attended dinners. They appeared in photographs. Miles was charming in public in the way certain men are charming, effortlessly and entirely for an audience. At home, he was somewhere else, even when he was in the room. Renata had noticed it the way you notice a slow leak, not the moment it begins, but only after the damage has spread, the canceled plans, the disinterest, the way he stopped asking about her work, and then stopped pretending to listen when she mentioned it anyway. She had adjusted, then readjusted. She had made herself quieter, more accommodating, less present. She had learned to take up less space. It had not helped. She was in their bedroom getting ready for an afternoon meeting when she heard the front door open earlier than expected. Miles's voice carried up the stairs, and then another voice, lighter, younger, laughing at something he said. Renata set down her earring and stood still. She recognized the laugh. Priya, his associate at the firm, the one he had described once as brilliant driven, someone the partners were keeping an eye on. Renata walked to the top of the stairs and listened. She wasn't proud of it, but she listened. "She won't be home until 6, Miles was saying. "She's always at the foundation on Thursdays." "You sure?" Priya's voice. "I'm sure." Renata stood there with one earring in her hand and something cold moving through her chest. She didn't storm downstairs, she didn't call out. She simply stood, very still, and let the truth of it settle over her the way snow settles, silently, completely, covering everything. She walked back into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, placed the earring carefully on the nightstand. This was what the distance had been. This was what all those changed plans and late nights. She pressed her hands flat against her knees and breathed. When Miles came upstairs 20 minutes later and found her sitting there, he went still in the doorway. She watched his face cycle through several things very quickly. Surprise, calculation, something almost like relief. "Renata, don't," she said. Her voice was quiet, not shaking. She hadn't expected that. He leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, which was how Miles Hargrove arranged himself when he was preparing to manage a situation. "It's not Miles." She looked at him. "I heard you." He said nothing. "How long?" she asked. He looked at the ceiling. "A while." "How long is a while?" "About a year." She absorbed that. A year. An entire year of her asking questions he had already answered privately, of her wondering what was wrong with her, adjusting herself, trying to shrink into a shape that might fit better into a space he had already filled with someone else. "I want a divorce," he said. He said it the way you say something you have rehearsed, carefully, but with the relief of finally saying it. "I think we both know this hasn't been working. It hasn't been fair to either of us." She almost laughed. The framing of it, both of us, neither of us. "The gala is tonight," she said instead. He blinked. "What?" "The Whitmore Gala. The one I've been organizing for 6 months. The one you were supposed to attend with me." She stood up, slowly. "I just wanted to say it out loud." He stared at her for a moment, clearly expecting something. Tears, an argument, a door slamming. She gave him none of it. She picked up her earring from the nightstand and put it on. "I'll have my lawyer call yours," she said. "You can move your things out by the end of the week." He left the room. She heard the front door a few minutes later, then silence. She sat back down on the edge of the bed. And then, finally alone, she let herself feel it. Not the dramatic collapse she might have expected, like a tide going out. The grief wasn't for the man who had just walked out. It was for the version of herself that had spent 2 years trying to make him stay. She pressed her hand to her sternum and breathed. Once. Twice. Then she picked up her phone and called her friend. His name was Lawrence Tate. He had been her closest friend for 11 years, since they had met at a conference in Chicago, where they had both been seated at the wrong table, and had ended up talking for 3 hours anyway. He was an architect, steady, observant, the kind of person who noticed structural problems before they became crises. He had liked Renata long before she had married Miles. He had never said so. He had attended the wedding, smiled at all the right moments, and kept his feelings in the only place he trusted them. His phone rang twice. Renata, his voice was immediate, alert. He always answered her calls like that, like he had been half expecting them. Lawrence. Her voice cracked slightly at the edges. Just slightly. What happened? She told him. All of it. Priya. The stares, Miles's relief when he said the word divorce. The year, the careful framing of it, hasn't been fair to either of us. Lawrence listened without interrupting. She could hear him breathing, steady, on the other end of the line. When she finished, there was a long pause. Where are you right now? He asked. Home. Don't stay there tonight. The gala is tonight. Come. She exhaled. Lawrence. Not for him. Not for appearances. His voice was firm and gentle at once. Come because you built that event. Come because you deserve one evening that isn't about him. Come because, he stopped, then quieter. Come because I want to see you walk into that room the way you should have been walking into rooms for the past 2 years. She was quiet for a moment. I don't know if I can, she said. You can. I'll be at the entrance at 7. She lowered the phone, slowly. The house was full of felt, for the first time, less like emptiness and more like space. Renata stood in front of her closet for a long time. She moved through dress after dress without really seeing them. Then her hand stopped on something pushed to the very back, covered in a garment bag she hadn't unzipped in over a year. She drew it out carefully, unzipped it. The dress was the color of deep amber, a warm burnished gold that caught light and held it. She had bought it on impulse 14 months ago, on a rare afternoon when she had felt, briefly and inexplicably like herself. She had thought, maybe for some evening when Miles actually looks at me across a room. She had put it in the back of the closet and quietly let that hope go to sleep. She held it up now. Then she put it on. The fit was extraordinary. The kind of fit that suggests a garment was made for a specific version of a person. Not the version that apologizes, not the version that adjusts, but the version that walks into a room and knows exactly what she's worth. She stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back at her was tired around the eyes. Yes, the grief was still there. It hadn't gone anywhere. But underneath it, something else. Something that had been there the whole time, quiet and patient, waiting for her to stop dimming it. She leaned forward and touched the mirror lightly with 2 fingers. You built something real, she told herself. Not out loud, just in the place where the thoughts live. You built the Emmeline Foundation from nothing. You helped 300 families get off waiting lists this year alone. You are not nothing. You never were. She stood up straighter. She did her hair. She did her makeup. Not to hide, but to surface. The version of herself she had been setting aside for 2 years came back slowly, like a photograph developing. Cheekbones she had forgotten. Eyes that were darker and steadier than she remembered. She added her mother's pearl earrings. She picked up her clutch. Before she left, she stood in the middle of the bedroom one last time. The room that had held so much careful silence, so many nights of lying awake, trying to figure out what she was doing wrong. And she looked at it, and she let it go. Then she walked out. The Whitmore Gala was everything she and her committee had spent 6 months building, and seeing it filled her with a complicated pride. The ballroom of the Aldrich Hotel was warm with candlelight and soft orchestral music. The tables were dressed in ivory and gold. Silent auction displays lined the walls. Donors she recognized and some she didn't moved through the crowd with champagne glasses and the careful ease of people who knew they were being seen. She had organized all of this. She had written the program, chosen the caterers, secured the keynote speaker, coordinated with the hotel for 3 months. Miles had never once asked how it was going. Lawrence was exactly where he said he would be, standing just inside the entrance, hands in his jacket pockets watching the door. The moment he saw her, he stopped entirely. He looked at her, the way you look at something that exceeds your memory of it. His expression moved through several quiet things before settling into something she couldn't, unguarded. "Renata," he said. He shook his head slightly, the way people do when words arrive too slowly. "You?" Another pause, then softly, "You look like yourself, the real version. I forgot how much I miss seeing that." She felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't known was tight. As they walked into the ballroom together, something shifted around them. Not dramatically, no music paused, no heads swiveled in unison, but a quiet adjustment happened in the room, the kind that occurs when something true enters a space that has been full of performance. Conversation slowed, eyes tracked toward her without apparent reason. This woman in amber who moved like a woman who had remembered, finally and completely, that she belonged wherever she chose to stand. She wasn't Miles Hargrove's wife tonight. She was Renata Cole, and that name had weight that no marriage had given her or taken away. Miles was there. She had known he might be. Several firm partners attended every year, and appearances mattered to Miles in the way that structural details matter to a building. Not for beauty, but for integrity that other people could see. He stood near the bar in his dark suit, with Priya at his side, mid-conversation with one of the senior partners. She had dreaded this moment for the past hour, and now that it arrived, she felt almost nothing. Or not nothing, something precise and quiet, the specific clarity of a woman who has stopped being afraid. She didn't avoid him. She walked the room naturally, greeting donors, speaking with the foundation's board members, accepting compliments about the evening with genuine warmth. Lawrence stayed close, not hovering, not performing, just present, solid, the way Lawrence always was. Miles saw her. She registered it from 20 feet away, the moment his Xi found her, and something in his expression broke its practiced composure. His eyes moved from her face to the dress to her face again, and then he was very still in the way a person is still when they are computing something they did not expect. This wasn't the woman he had left sitting quietly on the edge of a bed that afternoon. This was someone who had decided. Priya noticed his distraction and looked up. She found Renata across the room, and her expression did something complicated that had nothing to do with jealousy and everything to do with a private reckoning. She had been told, presumably, that Miles's wife was quiet, reserved, someone who had stopped trying. Looking at the woman across that ballroom, something in Priya's story was revising itself. Renata walked to the podium for her scheduled remarks. She had written the speech 3 weeks ago at the kitchen table in the early morning while Miles slept. She knew it by heart. She stood at the microphone and looked out at the room. 4 years ago, she began, the Emmeline Foundation started with a rented office, 2 volunteers, and a list of 300 families who had nowhere else to turn. Tonight, we celebrate what those 300 families built with us. She paused. Not what we did for them, what we built together, because that's what this work has always been about. The room listened, genuinely. When she finished, the applause was real. Not polite, real. She stepped down from the podium and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. The clean, uncomplicated satisfaction of being seen for something that was actually hers. Lawrence found her near the garden doors afterward, and he steered them gently into a quiet thinner. He handed her a glass of sparkling water. She took it. "You were extraordinary up there," he said. "It was just the speech. It wasn't just the speech." He was quiet for a moment, turning his own glass in his hands. "Renata, I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it without immediately telling me it's the wrong time." She looked at him. His voice was low, steady, the voice of a man who has rehearsed something for years and is only now allowing himself to say it out loud. "I have been your friend for 11 years. I showed up to your wedding, and I told myself that was the right thing, being there. Being what you needed, not making it complicated." He exhaled slowly. "But I watched you, tonight, and every night before, tonight, give yourself to a man who was actively deciding he didn't want you. And I stayed quiet because that was the arrangement. That was what friendship required." His jaw tightened slightly. "I can't stay quiet anymore." The room moved around them, Somewhere across the ballroom, Miles was watching. She could feel it. "What I feel for you," Lawrence said, "is not something I developed recently. It is not a response to tonight or to what happened today. It's been the quietest constant in my life for a very long time, and I am tired of keeping it in a drawer." He met her eyes. "I'm not asking you for anything right now. I know today was today and you need time and space and all the things that are true. I just needed you to know that when you're ready, when you get there, I am someone who has seen you fully on your worst days and your most invisible days, and I have never once looked away." The air between them was still. Renata looked at him for a long moment. This man who had sat on the phone with her at midnight when she was doubting herself, who had shown up with groceries once when she had mentioned offhandedly that she was too tired to cook, who had read her donor reports and asked genuine questions, who had known her all this time in every ordinary and specific way that actual knowing requires. "Lawrence," she said softly. He waited. "I'm not ready to say everything I think I might eventually want to say to you." Her voice was careful and honest. "But I don't want to leave tonight without you knowing that I heard you. All of it, and that it isn't one-sided." Something moved through his expression, a long-held breath released quietly. He offered his arm. She took it. They walked back through the ballroom together, unhurried, through the candlelight and the music, and every person who caught sight of them registered something. The ease between them, the lack of performance, the specific warmth of two people moving through a room together, as though they have always known the shape of the space they make. Miles watched them go. He stood beside Priya with his drink, and he watched Lawrence guide Renata through the crowd, and he watched her laugh at something Lawrence said, genuinely not for anyone's benefit, just the real thing. And he felt something he had not expected to feel tonight. Loss. True, specific, irreversible loss. He had looked at this woman for 4 years and seen what he expected to see. Quiet, contained, present in a way he had taken for background noise. He had not looked more carefully because he had not thought there was more to find. He had been catastrophically wrong. He thought about the speech, the applause, the way the room had actually listened. He thought about the dress, the diamonds at her ears, the way she had walked to that podium, like she had been walking towards something her whole life. He had never seen her like that. The more devastating truth was that she had always been like that. He had simply never bothered to look. He felt Priya's hand on his arm, and he barely registered it. Later that night, alone in the apartment that still smelled faintly of the dinner they had ordered, and the conversation that had been easy and light, Priya sat with a glass of wine and turned over what she had seen. She had known Miles was married. She had told herself the story that people tell themselves, that a marriage that wasn't working was already over, that she hadn't broken anything that wasn't already broken. She thought about the woman at the gala, the speech, the way that room had listened. She picked up her phone. She typed a message to Miles, sat with it for a while, and then sent it. "I've been thinking about tonight, about what I saw. I don't think I can keep doing this, not because of logistics, but because of who I saw at that podium. She deserved better than what either of us gave her. I'm sorry. I don't think this is something we should continue." She set her phone down. Then she sat in the quiet of her apartment, with the honest discomfort of someone who has revised a story about themselves and found the revision painful and necessary and true. The divorce was handled with the precision and efficiency of two people who had already grieved on separate schedules what the marriage had not been. Papers were signed, assets were divided fairly. There was no courtroom drama. There was mostly silence and signatures and the specific gravity of an ending that has been a long time coming. Renata moved into a new apartment in March. It was smaller than the house, bright and south-facing, with big windows and bare walls she was in no hurry to fill. She liked the emptiness for a while. It felt like potential. She kept running the Emmeline Foundation. The year after the gala was their biggest fundraising year to date. She hired 2 new case managers. She expanded the housing program to cover 3 additional counties. At an industry luncheon in April, she was recognized with a leadership award by the board of a national nonprofit alliance, something she had not applied for. Someone else had nominated her. She stood at the lectern and accepted the award and thought, briefly, about 2 years of making herself smaller in a house where she had believed, somehow, that was what love required. She was never going to do that again. Lawrence took her to dinner in May, not a date announced loudly or with fanfare. Just a Thursday evening reservation at a small Italian restaurant she had always liked and somehow never gone to because Miles hadn't been interested in Italian. They split a bottle of Barolo and talked for 4 hours without noticing the time. They talked about work and about their families and about the 11 years of friendship that, they were beginning to realize, had always been something more patient and specific than either of them had named. At the end of the evening, on the sidewalk in front of the restaurant, Lawrence put his hand on the side of her face with a gentleness that had nothing desperate in it. "I have waited 11 years, he said very quietly, "to be someone's first choice." She looked up at him. "You're mine," she said. He kissed her. It was gentle and unhurried, the way things are when they're grounded in something real. Not a beginning that crashed into being, more like a door that had been slightly ajar for a very long time, finally quietly opened all the way. Miles learned, eventually, the way people learn about things they have let go. Gradually, from a distance, in pieces that arrive without the context that might have made them useful. He heard about the award at the nonprofit luncheon from a mutual contact. He saw a photograph online from a profile that a local magazine had run on the Emmeline Foundation. Renata at her desk, clear-eyed and calm, surrounded by her team. He heard from the same mutual contact that she was seeing someone good, someone who had known her for years. He sat with all of that for a long time. He didn't reach out. There was nothing to say that wasn't too late and too little, and composed entirely of his own regret, which was his to keep. He had looked at this woman for 4 years and chosen every day not to see her. That was not her failure. Renata and Lawrence married the following spring. It was a small ceremony, 50 people, a garden in Connecticut where the light came through the trees at exactly the right angle, and a late afternoon that stretched into evening without anyone wanting it to end. She wore a simple ivory dress and her mother's pearls, and when she looked across the aisle at Lawrence standing there in the late light, his expression unguarded and completely present, she felt something she had a hard time naming because she had so little prior experience with it. Not relief, not arrival, something quieter and steadier. The feeling of being known. A year later, they had a daughter. They named her June. For the month Renata had decided to stop disappearing. She would be, from the beginning, a child raised by a woman who had learned. Late, through loss, through one dress and one evening, and one friend who had been watching, that a person who makes not protecting anyone. She is only teaching everyone around her that she is easy to overlook. Renata Cole had spent years being easy to overlook. She had learned at 37, in the amber light of a dress she had nearly left in a garment bag, exactly what that lesson cost. She was done paying it.